Okay, cool. Well, let me go to that screen there. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be. My name is Christopher Harrison, and today we're going to be talking about chatbots, or more specifically, actually, what we're going to be talking about is demystifying chatbots, which I think should be kind of a fun little topic here. That chatbots, of course, is one of the most popular one of the most popular types of apps to build these days. That it's such a great entry point into doing development that's going to be involving AI. It's a fantastic interface. It's a great way to interact with the user and so forth and so on. And one of the challenges that you frequently run into when talking about chatbots is that word bot. And the moment that people hear the word bot, they immediately start assuming things that just aren't possible yet. And that's not to say, of course, that the technology is bad or anything like that. It's just that there's something about that term that gets everybody very, very excited. But as we're going to see today, it really is nothing more than an app. And in fact, basically, that's my whole goal here. My whole goal is to demystify chatbots, is to bring it down into a set of skills that you actually already have, that you had the power to go home this whole time. All I'm going to do is teach you how to click your heels 3 times for anybody who gets that Wizard of Oz reference there. So with that, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just real quick make an update to my little stream here, and I'm going to get that into there. Let's hit OK. Let's just resize this just a scotch so it looks just a little bit better in the stream. I think that's good. Okay, cool. Alrighty. So, yeah, sorry that you forgot your slippers there, Sean. And obviously we are live, so feel free to ask all of the questions that that you might have. That I'm here for you and not the other way around. So please, please, please do ask questions. Otherwise, you know, it gets sort of lonely over here. So that's a great question. So the question right away, and I'll go ahead and answer it, is what language is better to build bots? My answer to you is whatever language it is that you feel most comfortable with. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute, Christopher, that's just a cop-out. You just don't want to take a stance. That's not true. Because honestly, I would say that with many things, that you really do want to start with the language that you're most comfortable with, because that's going to allow you to be the most productive. Now, that being said, I will say, for my own personal opinion, for my own Christopher Harrison personal opinion, that I use TypeScript whenever I'm creating bots. And the reason that I use TypeScript is because it's flexible, that I can very easily create objects on the fly, which I find quite frequently that I need to do when I'm building inside of a chatbot, where I don't always know what it is that the user is going to wind up saying. And then unlike something like JavaScript, I actually will get some level of type safety. I'll get better IntelliSense autocomplete that'll be available to me, and cool things like that. So I really prefer to use TypeScript, but I want to highlight the fact that Bot Framework is available in Python, it's available in JavaScript, thus in turn TypeScript, and it's also available in C#. I want to say that there's a Java port as well. I'll openly admit I haven't done Java in more years than I care to admit. So, it is available, I think, inside of Java. But yeah, use the language that you're most comfortable with. And yeah, I adore TypeScript. I love TypeScript. Okay. So that's a fantastic question. So let's go ahead then and start talking about chatbots. So I have to admit my bit of disappointment here that when I was first told back a handful of years ago that I was going to be working on bots, I immediately assumed, awesome, I'm going to get to work on battle bots. I'm going to get to blow stuff up and cut things in half and do all of these wonderful things. And instead, what I quickly found out is that this is what I'm going to be building instead. And I laugh because I care. I joke because I care. But I also sort of joke to kind of make a very big point. And this really is, like I said at the top, going to be the consistent thread that's going to lead us through everything that we're going to be talking about, at least in my world, this afternoon, this evening. So the moment people say chatbots, they immediately start assuming all of these fanciful things that chatbots are simply not capable of doing. That they hear the word bot and they just immediately assume, oh, okay, I must be able to do, and then just a whole bunch of fanciful AI components. And I'll always remember working with somebody who is going to be building a bot for doing some level of like internal account management or something similar to that. And the moment that they heard the word bot, they just immediately started assuming all of these wonderful things that the bot might be able to do, that it could preemptively start reaching out to a user to detect that they had a problem, or that it would be able to automatically use some wonderful ML to go ahead and detect when there might be a problem, or start to learn over time what like the solutions are and things like that. And I want to highlight the fact that all of that is certainly possible. Like you could absolutely go in and start implementing AI, start implementing your own custom ML models and all of that, and make all of that happen. And then you could put a bot in front of that as a way for the user to communicate. But I want you to note what I said in that sentence there. I said you could create all of this wonderful AI and ML stuff, and then you could put a bot in front of it. And if you think about normal applications that you might be building, I'm going to create a whole bunch of AI ML stuff, and I'm going to put a website in front of it, or I'm going to put a Windows app in front of it, or I'm going to put a mobile app in front of it. Note what's happening here. What we're doing is we're doing all of this cool stuff back here, and then we're exposing it out through some form of user experience that we call an app. Well, that's exactly what a bot is. All that a bot is it's an app. It gives me the ability to have a user interface in front of something that's going on back here. Now, again, as we're going to see, don't get me wrong. Can your bot be improved by adding, say, natural language processing or NLP? Sure. But again, it depends on what it is that you're going to be doing, just like with any other tool. Could it be improved by incorporating some level of ML? Sure. But again, that's true about any app. It really all depends on what it is that you're trying to do. There's this old saying that if the only tool that you have is a hammer, that everything looks like a nail. And that certainly holds true here, that a bot is just a tool, just like AI is just a tool, just like ML is just a tool. And Code with Sean highlights something that I think is sort of perfect here, which is I'm amazed at how many bots are used on Switch. Now, setting aside spam bots, bots, of course, in Twitch, the way that you interact with them is you put an exclamation point or a bang at the beginning, and then you issue a command. And so what's happening is that the bot is really just a basic app. That it's looking at the chat window, it's keeping an eye out for anything that starts with an exclamation point, anything that starts with a bang, and then it will look up inside of a command table what it is the person is trying to do, and then execute that way. And I know that that sounds very simplistic. I know that that sounds like something that could be done with nothing more than a switch statement and a database. And you know what? You're absolutely right, because effectively all that it is just a switch statement and a database. That's really it. That's all that there is to it. But yet, it's perfect. And the reason that it's perfect is because it solves the use case. That when somebody has a Twitch bot, what they're looking to do is to have it answer some very common questions that might come up with users, be able to quickly share out information, all of those types of things. So the bot works perfect in that scenario. And I want you to notice there was no AI and there was no ML that was there. So, and Chillennial, I apologize that Take Over the World didn't work. I'm also apologizing I didn't wear my Pinky in the Brain shirt tonight. That would have been fantastic. So Jonas mentions, I'm not coding a bot, but a system that learns what the user does and then offers to do it automatically. Okay. So apparently we're just going to chit chat a little bit here and just kind of go through some questions. And these are great questions, which is why I want to answer them. So again, Jonas says, I'm not coding a bot, but a system that learns what the user does and then offers to do it automatically. One of the things that I try very hard to do when I'm talking about chatbots is to say chatbots, and unfortunately, I fail basically 85% of the time because bot is just so easy to say. It's also, you know, the name of the framework is bot framework. When you go to deploy in Azure, you're going to be deploying a bot in Azure and so forth. And unfortunately, in English, that term bot is very, very overloaded. So that scenario that Jonas highlights there of a bot that learns what a user does, yeah, we would absolutely in English consider that a bot, because after all, it's going to be something that's going to be learning a little bit over time and then being able to proactively do something for the user or to figure out what it is that the user is trying to say. And in English, yeah, we would absolutely consider that as a bot, but that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is chatbots. And again, that's a very distinct difference there. And so the phrase that you're going to get me sick and tired of me saying here tonight, again, tonight my time, is the fact that a bot is an app. That's all that there is to it. So Code with Sean then highlights, it's just like a console app with argument parsing, and I swear that Sean is not a plant here. Let's go ahead and start getting into this. So let's do a little bit of history lesson. And I have to say that typically when I'm teaching a new technology, I always like to just gloss over the history. Like I don't care about prior versions or what anything like that did in the past. That usually I just want to know what's happening right now. Just tell me what's happening right now. That's all that I really care about. But I think in this case, a little bit of a review of history is important here, because after all, what we're talking about is new ways and different ways that we're going to be interacting with our computers. And if you happen to have tuned in to my conversation yesterday with Ben Brown, this was something that he highlighted, is the fact that, you know, all that we've done with like these keyboards with, you know, funny little curves in them and letters in really strange orders and so forth, this is not natural. That sure, we've all gotten used to it, but that doesn't mean that this is a natural way to interact with a computer. And in a lot of ways, this is what we've done throughout history, is we've just come up with unnatural ways to interact with computers. And we all started with this command line here. So there's the command line. And that's all that I'm going to get. And the command line is great because it will literally do anything that I tell it to do, but it's going to require me talking in a language that I don't understand. Chances are everybody that is viewing me here to, yeah, swear, Sean's not a plant. Never met Sean. I'm sure Sean is a very nice person, great human being, donates to charity, you know, all that great stuff. But yeah, Sean, not a plant. Never met him. But anyway, so back over here. So chances are everybody that is viewing this uses a command line on a regular basis. Maybe you prefer the command line. Me personally, I prefer the command line. And the reason that I prefer the command line is because of the power, because I can get right to exactly what it is that I need to be able to do, and I don't need to go hunt for it or otherwise. But the catch here is it works for me because I know the language. If you're a generic user, you're not going to know what that language is. And what's really frustrating is that that's what you're going to get. That all you're going to get is something that's going to show you typically the current directory and nothing else. And to make matters worse, when you're working with a command line, it's going to trust that you know what you're doing. So if you make a mistake, rm tick rf, something like that, now all of a sudden you're going to wind up having some potential problems. So command line works. It certainly has its advantages, but again, this is not really a natural way to interact with a computer. It's not fantastic. So then what happened is we got GUIs, that we got a mouse. Okay, cool. So now we got a mouse. And so now if I'm going to use the mouse, then I can go ahead and I can click on different things and I can start to look around, figure out what it is that I want to do. And so rather than giving you this arcane language, we instead decided, let's show you all the options. Let's give you a menu. But you know what? If we're going to give you a menu with some options, we may as well give you options for your options. And if we're going to give you options for your options, then you know what we should do? Yep, you guessed it. We should give you options for your options for your options. So this is some form of a word processing app that that these screenshots are from. And what I want to highlight is a little story that if you've used Office, of course, you're familiar with the ribbon, or now if you've used Windows, you're familiar with the with that ribbon interface that you get up at the very top with these great blocks, these great buttons that show you, hey, this is probably what you're going to be looking for. And all of the most common commands are right there out in front of you. So you don't have to go hunting through a menuing system to go find them. The reason that the ribbon exists is because some crazy percentage of new feature requests, I want to say I heard like 90% at some point, but please don't quote me on that. But I want to say something like 90% of the new feature requests that were coming in for Office before the ribbon was introduced were options or were for features that were already in the product. Let me say that again. 90% of the feature requests coming in were for features that were already in the product. As it turned out, the problem wasn't that the feature wasn't there, obviously, because it was there. The problem was the fact that nobody could figure out where it was. They couldn't find it in the menuing system. So to a certain extent, this now becomes a little bit like a command prompt. Because again, if I can't find what I'm looking for, if I can't figure out what it is that I'm trying to do, it's not going to be any real help to me. So the other challenge that we have with something like a menu-based system is the fact that this is going to require that we do a local install. And so rather than requiring you to do a local install, let's instead give you a website. And with a website, now we've got a lot of space Because unlike a Windows app, we're going to be constrained by the window and screen resolution. Scrolling isn't necessarily always a thing unless you're doing like, word processing or something like that. But I really can't do that for like navigation and so forth. But with a website, I've got all the space in the world. Let's use it, right? Cool. So here's a website. Now you're going to go find whatever it is that you're looking for. Well, maybe it's in these menus. Let's look inside of there. Maybe it's down at the very bottom of the page. Let's look inside of there. And here's probably the most frustrating part for users. It's right here. Now we go to a different page. So these first 3 screenshots, all from the same page. 1, 2, 3. Then we go to a new page, and now we have to learn all over again. And it's worth highlighting the fact that both of those pages are from the exact same company. Now, granted, yes, if you want to make the argument of, hey, my page layout, of course, is going to look different because of the fact that I'm going to be offering up different pieces of information, sure, I'm with you on that. But the fact of the matter is that this is something that the user now needs to relearn. So the too long didn't read, the TLDR on all of this is the fact that every interface that we have is problematic. But yet, at the same time, each interface does have its advantage. As we talked about with the command prompt, if you know what you're doing, you can cut right to it. And as we talked about with a menuing system, my option is there. I'm going to have to dig a little bit, but I can at least go in and I can find it. And when we're talking about websites, I get a lot of space. I get a lot of things like a hamburger maybe on a mobile site. And I also have the ability to I don't have to install this locally. So there are certainly advantages here. So then the question becomes, well, why introduce another component? Why introduce another feature? And the primary reason is it gives us an ability to meet users where they're at. And this is a phrase that I really always like to hone in on. That you need to meet people where they're at. That whenever I'm talking about something like SharePoint or like Office 365 or otherwise, what I'm talking about is being able to meet users where they're at. That if I can do something like right where they are, so if they're already in Outlook, for example, and I can interact with them there, cool. Then they don't have to install something, they don't have to do anything else. I'm meeting that user where they're at. And you know where users are at these days? Right here. They're on their phones. And on their phones, they have things like text messaging. On their phones, they've got Messenger. They've got Telegram. Well, I think some people still have Telegram. They've got, whatever messaging app it is that you might be using. And that's where they're spending a lot of time. Or they're on social media. So let's think about, for example, a Facebook page. Facebook page is a great example. Because with a Facebook page, if I'm a company and I set up a Facebook page, I'm automatically going to get the ability for somebody to message that Facebook page. Well, the problem is that with that little messenger, if nobody's watching it, it's that old question, if a tree falls in a forest, nothing around here, does it make a sound? The answer to that question is no. If a user sends a message, if a potential customer sends a message and there's nobody around to hear it, did they send a message? And the answer is no. And so at that point, your Facebook page is really nothing more than a glorified blog. That's a problem. My user, my customer is there. My customer wants to talk to me. My customer maybe wants to give me money. And if I want to stay in business, you know what I want to do? I want to make it very easy for them to give me money. So I want to make sure that I'm able to meet them where they're at. So that's the first big part about that why now. And then the other big part is going to be some level of artificial intelligence that I know I'm going to be spending a lot of time here downplaying artificial intelligence and machine learning, but it's still worth calling out because many bots that you're going to be using will have some form of NLP, natural language processing, or otherwise. So the fact that these technologies have become more mature, the fact that these technologies are more widely available, the fact that we've got cheaper computing power, all of that does then lead to this proliferation of bots. And that's wonderful. But again, what is a bot? A bot is simply an app. And this leads me perfectly into, by far, the #1 question that I get asked about chatbots. And that is, do you need speech? And the answer is, well, it depends, but maybe not. Let's talk about use cases. So I've already got a phone here. I can talk to my phone. I can count on the number, I can count the number of times that I've talked to my phone on probably 2 hands. And the reason that I don't talk to my phone is because it's typically faster, more convenient for me to just go ahead and type. And this is especially true when I'm out in public, when I'm sitting in a crowded space. That obviously I don't want to be having a conversation with my phone at that point. But yet, we have multiple different corporate listening devices inside of our house that I can go ahead and like ask for the weather, set timers, ask for the news, tell it to turn on and off the lights. And for those devices, I talk to those quite frequently because it meets my use case. That what I want to be able to do very quickly is turn on the lights in the living room, or turn off the lights in the dining room, or find out what the news is. And so in that scenario, I have a use case to be able to talk to it. But note the scenario, and that really is going to be the key here, is in that scenario, I need to be able to talk to it. If I'm driving, I need to be able to talk to it. But if I've got a device in my hand, I don't need to be able to talk to it. So, yeah, so somebody calls out if you're a driver. Barata Toxica calls out if you're a driver. The speech feature is a must. You're absolutely right. But again, remember the use case. That's going to be somebody that's going to be driving. That's going to be somebody who doesn't have their hands free. And so now, rather than going, oh, I'm going to implement this because this is cool, I'm going to implement this because there's a use case. For anybody who is who's old enough, an early precursor to Facebook, an early social media site to Facebook, was this place called MySpace. And MySpace apparently still exists, and it's still a thing. But one big thing about MySpace was the fact that it allowed people to actually modify their HTML, inject like MIDI files, and things like that. And on one hand, it was great because it allowed people to go in and play around with like HTML and do cool things in a space. But the problem, of course, is that what it led to is a whole bunch of people that were adding MIDI files and creating funky cursors and doing all of these different things simply because of the fact that they knew how. And so what that created on MySpace was this really jarring, frustrating interaction, user experience. That's the word I'm looking for, user experience. Because I would go to one page and it would look like this, and another page and it would look like this. And typically there was just, it was just over the top. It was really challenging. And the reason that it was really challenging was because what you had was a whole bunch of people that were doing things simply because of the fact that they knew how. And that really comes back to when we're talking about chatbots as well, is that we want to make sure that we're using things for the right reasons. So your bot does not need speech, natural language processing, artificial intelligence, machine learning, or anything like that. It doesn't need it. Now, if the problem that I'm trying to solve, if my use case says, hey, I've got a driver here and they need to be able to talk to it, then you know what I'm going to need? I'm going to need speech recognition. If my use case says I want to give the person the ability to describe something to me, then I'm going to want natural language processing. If I'm going to be incorporating some ability to be able to like upload photos so that way I can read text, then maybe I do want artificial intelligence, or maybe I do want machine learning. But note here that all of that has nothing to do with the bot itself, but it is all about the use case. Okay, so let's go ahead and, whoops, get into some code. So I know that I spent about 30 minutes there really just talking about chatbots. And the reason that I wanted to spend some time talking about chatbots is I really just wanted to make it clear here sort of three basic words. One really small sentence. And that sentence is that a bot is simply an app. And I know that I did spend a lot of time on that, but the other, like a big part of it was to get to that. But the other part of it is because I wanted to help demystify this. Again, that's the whole goal here, is to demystify chatbots. So the moment that somebody says chatbot, they immediately start assuming, oh, I need to do ML. Oh, I need to do natural language processing. You might need those things. Absolutely. Maybe you do. But you don't necessarily need that. That you could absolutely just send down buttons. You could just send down the ability for somebody to type in certain commands, things like that. Those can absolutely be perfect use cases. Or in the example that I'm going to kind of walk through here, is that could be a front end for a search capability. And that's going to be the scenario that I'm going to be walking through here. Yep. Okay. So let's go ahead and start building our bot here. So I'm going to build our bot completely from scratch. Now, I want to highlight, if you go to dev.botframework.com, what you're going to notice on here is that you can go check out the SDK. And if you go check out the documentation, and maybe bring up the quick start over here for the SDK, what you're going to notice is that for JavaScript, because that's what I'm going to be doing here, that they're going to have you use a Yeoman generator right here. So if you're not familiar with a Yeoman generator, Yeoman generators will automatically scaffold out a bot for you. And you can absolutely use the Yeoman generator. In fact, I strongly recommend that you use the Yeoman generator. But one of the things about using a generator of any variety is the fact that it's going to do an awful lot automatically for you, and you might not understand what it is that it's doing. And so that's why I want to get in and do this inside of Visual Studio Code and just completely from scratch. So then that way you know exactly what it is that's going on here. So I'm going to set up my package.json here. And there we go. And I'm just going to use the inline terminal right here. So I'm going to go ahead and say npm install save, and I'm going to grab 3 different components here. I'm going to go grab Restify, I'm going to grab node fetch, and I'm going to grab bot builder. Okay, so Restify is sort of like a streamlined version of Express, for those of you who are familiar with Express, that is specifically targeted at creating REST endpoints. That's basically what it's all about. Node fetch is simply the node version of fetch. And if you're anything like me, and I know I am, every time I hear fetch, all I can ever think is stop trying to make fetch happen. Maybe that's just me. And then last but not least is bot builder. And then bot builder is, of course, going to be the SDK. There is a D in bot builder. So let me make sure that I add that in, hit enter. And then this will go ahead and do the install. OK. Yeoman sounds like a glorified black box generator. Yeah, and that's from Purpose Drifter. I think that I think that's understanding the power of Yeoman a little bit, that Yeoman actually can do quite a bit, that you can walk through like a bit of a menuing system and really drive it. So it's a tool just like anything else. And so all of the different generators that are available are really based on how good the generator is. So that's really what's going to drive how black boxy it winds up being there. Okay. So I've got bot builder, node fetch, and restify. I'm going to install one other item here, install save dev nodemon, which if you're not familiar with nodemon, nodemon will automatically just do a watch and a restart anytime that you save your files. And so I could just go in and now create a brand new script where I'm going to say build, actually I'll say start watch. There we go. And let's say nodemon index.js. Okay, cool. And so now if I create an index.js file, let me do that real quick. Index.js, there we go. Now I could go ahead and say npm run start watch. And so now this will just keep running in the background. Cool. All right. So what is a bot? Well, a bot is an app. But a bot, to get a little bit more specific, is nothing but a REST endpoint. And so what we're going to see with a bot, what we're going to see with a chatbot, is that all requests are going to come in to one post endpoint. Everything comes into one post endpoint. If you're familiar with like WebSocket, WebSocket at its most core, unless you're using something like SignalR or otherwise, which is going to help you distribute different types of events into different places. WebSocket, all events come into one space through and through. And the exact same thing is going to happen here. Everything's going to come into one spot. So let's go ahead and set that up. So let's create the REST endpoint. And so I'm going to say const restify equals require and restify. I'm going to create my server. Const server equals restify create server. I'm going to start my server. Server listen. And then I'm going to say process env port or process env port or 3978. And then a real quick console log server up, like that. Whoops, I always do that. There we go. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at what I've got right now. So if you've done like Express, this would be very familiar to you if you've never done Restify. If you've done Restify, you do this constantly. So this right here is just turning on my server. This is setting up my port number. And this is just putting out a real quick log, server up, in my case. That's it. Now I want to accept the bot messages. And all my bot messages are going to come into a single post. I'm going to mark this as API WAC messages, which is just simply the convention. And then I'm going to say async rec res for my request and my response. And then my logic is going to eventually go here. So up until this point, if you've done Restify, if you've done Express, there's nothing fancy here. And that's really the whole point. There is nothing fancy. The fancy part is when we get into our bot. So let's get into our bot. And so now, let's go get it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say const bot builder. Actually, I'm just going to call it builder. Make my life a little easier. Equals require and bot builder. Okay. So now, is it possible to have logic while you use JavaScript? I don't know that I understand the question. Okay. So I've got my bot builder. Now, what's eventually going to have to happen here is I'm going to need to be able to take the request that came in through the endpoint, do something with it, and then eventually send something out to the bot. So if we were going to kind of draw out, what can I do to draw? Give me chaga. I want to open up that window here. I'm going to do that. There we go. Okay. So are you going to let me draw on this slide? You're not. You don't let me draw on it. Okay, fine. Let me just go into in a full screen here. So here's what's going to happen. Over here is going to be my chatbot. So my user is going to be talking to my chatbot. My chatbot is going to take basically everything that the user says, everything that the user does, and send that across over here to my logic. And so what I need is I need something that's going to be able to interpret what it is that the bot said. And then what I'm going to need to happen eventually is I want to send a message back to the bot to then be displayed back out to the user. So I'm going to need something that's going to be able to do that. Or in other words, I'm going to need something that's going to sit in the middle here, that's going to be able to understand what the bot is saying, how to communicate back to the bot, etc. That is what a bot adapter is all about. So let me create a bot adapter. Const adapter equals new bot framework adapter. Just like that. And so this is going to be my go-between. And so now, if I go to my adapter here, what we're going to notice is we've got an awful lot that we can start to work with when it comes to managing our bot, managing our connection. So I can start reading stuff off of the wire. I can do an awful lot. But the core part here is going to be process request. So, whoops, is that the one that I want? Process activity, sorry, knew that was wrong. I want process activity. So an activity is going to be that the user has done something. They've like connected, they've sent a message, something. Generically, that's going to be an activity. So remember that my activity is going to have been sent into this web request. So I'm going to hand it my web request. I also needed to be able to send something back, again, over the web. So I'm going to hand it back that response object. And now here comes my logic. Right here is where my actual logic goes. Now, That core object there, context, that's what I care about. Because context is going to give me everything that was sent up from that user. Also known as a turn context. Turn is a full round trip here. So that's going to give me access to everything. So the question is, if bots read all the messages in order to be able to figure out what commands or needs to be processed? The answer is it's completely up to you to decide what it is that, that you want to do there. Okay. So let's go ahead and use that context. And what you're going to notice is that I have the ability to send an activity back. So my context is going to be created when we're processing an activity. Specifically, we're processing an activity. This is whatever it is the user sent up. Send activity is where I'm going to be able to send something back. So for right now, I'm just simply going to say, I am Groot. That's it. So now let's go ahead and see our little bot in action here. So what I'm going to do is fire up my emulator. Downloaded the bot framework emulator already. I'm going to click open bot and then punch in that 3978 API messages URL. I'm going to click connect. And what you're going to notice is I get a 404 error message because of some reason messages. There we go. That'll make a difference. Okay. Sorry, I just had a typo. Let me go ahead and just try that again. There we go. So now that I fixed my typo behind the scenes and restarted my bot, what you're going to notice is it sends, I am Groot. Hi there. I am Groot. Hello. I am Groot. So it's going to do this regardless of what it is that the user has sent up. And if we take a look inside of our back and forth here, what we can actually see is, as promised here, that all of this is just JSON objects that are going back and forth. That's really it. And so let's break this down. You know, let's talk a little bit about this bang command here. You know, because this isn't the direction I was originally planning on going, but because of the fact that this was brought up, let me go with this. So there's a little conversation in the chat window here about like incorporating a bot in something like this. I know I've got an error message there, which I'll fix in a second here. But let's talk about this. So first of all, I do need to make sure that I always use await, and that's what that error message is all about. Now, let's find out what the user said. So remember, it's all about activities. When the user sends something up, they sent me an activity. Well, one big thing about that activity is the fact that it could be a lot of different types. So it could be something like they were typing. So if you use, fill in message app here and you see those three little dots, that's typing. Bot can actually detect that. In fact, we can actually send typing, which, by the way, it's a good practice. But the other big thing is they can send messages. And messages are going to be the core of what it is that I'm going to be looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and say if my type is message. And if it is, now I want to figure out, well, do I need to respond to it? So let's say that I was going to deploy this into a Twitch channel. And again, for those of you who are maybe not overly familiar with bots inside of a Twitch channel, typically what they're going to be looking for is an exclamation point at the very beginning. So I'm now going to come back up here and say, and context activity, need to just change my zoom a little bit. Text starts with, there we go. Okay. I hope that that text is still big enough to read. It should be. Okay. So I'm going to check to see whether or not it's a message. And then I'm going to see whether or not that text starts with a bang. And if it does, now I know that I've got a user command here. And so now it's just simply a matter of working from here. So what I can do is then say switch and maybe message, whoops, context, activity, text, substring, and then we'll start at number 1, so that will put me just beyond the bang, and then we'll just get the rest of the characters from there. And then we'll go ahead and say case, and maybe we'll do something like uptime. That's a common one. There we go. Let's make it case insensitive. So something like uptime. So we'll go ahead and say await context, send activity, streamer has been talking a long time, and then break, and then maybe something like case, and then let's say info, and then maybe await context, send activity, streamer is babbling, break, and then else, await context, send activity, I know that needs to be default. I'll go back and change that in a second. I openly admit I don't use switch statements all that frequently. But yeah, so there you go. So voila, I've now created a Twitch bot. So now if I go ahead and I save this, let's come back over to our emulator here. I'm just going to restart my conversation. And now, first of all, what you're going to notice is that it didn't greet me, didn't do anything. And of course, if we're talking about something like Twitch here, then it's going to not want to be like saying hi to everybody that's coming in. That's really not a great way to do it. So I really just want it to just sit there. I really just don't want it to do anything unless somebody specifically calls it. So hi and hello and are you there? Like, it shouldn't do anything. And that's exactly what we want to have happen. And then we go ahead and say something like bang uptime. And now it'll come back and give me the message, because now basically I've turned it on. Now, I do want to highlight the fact, and this is one very important thing to keep in mind about all bots, is the bot is going to get every single message of the channel that it's been added into. And this is going to be true with like Twitch or Slack or anything else. So you have to make sure that you trust that bot, that you know what that bot is all about. But that's basically it. So this is sort of what a Twitch bot is doing behind the scenes. Now, obviously, there's more to grow from here. That obviously there would be some form of a database, because if you're talking about the various Twitch bots that are available, they're going to allow the user to be able to and by user, I mean streamer. So let me say streamer here. They're going to allow the streamer to be able to set certain pieces of information that they could go in and update a value here, update a value here, etc., and then be able to have that be exposed out through there. So there's a few different things that are done. And so then the next question is, well, then how do you get it into, say, Twitch or something like that? And the answer to that is, Well, it sort of all depends. So Twitch in this case would be in bot framework terms, so in Microsoft terms, the terms that we would use, what's known as a channel. So channels are all of the different actual endpoints that the user is going to be using, that I'm not going to expect that my user is going to use bot framework emulator to talk to it. At least I hope they're not. That instead they're going to be using Facebook Messenger, they're going to be using Slack, they're going to be using Twitch, they're going to be using something like that. And basically all of these platforms have some mechanism, some set of hooks that will allow a bot to connect to it. So that they'll have some outgoing message that will be able to send all of that out to the bot, and then allow through some set of APIs for the bot to come back in. And one great advantage to bot framework is the fact that there are a whole bunch of channels. I'm just trying to find, I know that there's a list of channels somewhere. I'm hoping that if I pause long enough that I'll be able to dig it up. Oh, yeah. It was right there in front of my face. It was here the whole time. Yeah. There we go. Yeah. So if you notice, I just went into the docs, and then under channels, you'll notice that this can hook up to Alexa, and this can hook up to Skype, and this can hook up to WebEx, and this can hook up to Telegram, all out of the box. But just because you don't see it out of the box here doesn't mean that it couldn't be hooked up to something else, that there actually is a full set of APIs that you could use to pull this in. So right now, at least out of the box, bot framework doesn't support Twitch, but that's not to say that that nobody else has created a connector. That's not to say that it couldn't be done, because it absolutely could be. So that's how something like this could happen. Now, as with everything, and I'm certainly going to say with Twitch bots, there's a lot of great services that are already built that you could just go ahead and take advantage of. You don't necessarily have to go in and create your own custom bot code. But if you were ever curious about what's happening behind the scenes, to a certain extent, again, this is an oversimplification, this is kind of it. All right, so the end of all of that, if we wrap all of this up, because my time is basically up here, the takeaway from all of this is a bot is simply an app. It's an app with a different style of interface. It's an app that allows me to meet users where they're at. It's an app that can incorporate cool services like AI and ML and natural language processing and all of those different things. But at the end of the day, it's simply an app. Cool. All right. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. If you are curious more about bots, then we do have, if you're not already tired of my jokes, another session on Thursday where I'm going to be talking a bit more about bot design and some of the things that you want to think about when you're interacting with the users there. So with that, I do want to thank everybody for attending. You were a fantastic audience. I love all the questions and interactivity. So that was just great. Thank you very much. Thank you for all of the kind words in there. And I will talk to all of you soon. Again, come see me on Thursday morning, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.